Association of Bella Vista, in cooperation with Bella Vista Community Television, presents the monthly POA board meeting held at the Bella Vista Country Club.
I'd like to call the June regular Board of Directors meeting to order. Please stand. Pledge of Allegiance. You remain standing. Our invocation tonight will be given by Pastor Randall Castleman of Bella Vista Church of Christ.
Father, we're indebted to you for so much, and we thank you. We thank you for providentially bringing us together in this village and for the good life that we enjoy here. We thank you, Father, for those who serve in the village. We're mindful especially of the police department and the fire department, and we pray that you will protect them as they protect us. For others, Father, who provide services that make life here so good. We're thankful, Father, for this board and for their serving. We pray that you will be with them, that you will give them wisdom, help them make decisions, Father, that will be best for the village, best for our life together. We pray for unity and continued fellowship. We admit our stumblings, our wrongdoings. We ask that you forgive us, help us to be patient and forgiving of one another. In Jesus' name.
Thank you, Pastor. I have no additions or deletions to the agenda. We'll begin with the report on the board executive session held on May 21st. I've asked John to give that for us.
Bella Vista Board of Directors met May 21st at the Bella Vista Country Club in executive session. In attendance were Vice Chairman Brad Morris, Directors Ruth Hatcher, Josh Hart, Ron Stratton, Dave Barfield, and John Nuttall. Director Lowry and Director Brooks were absent. Corporate Secretary Kathy Ferguson was there to count ballots. The board met for the purpose of electing officers for the 2015-2016 session. The already announced results. Bob Brooks was elected chairman and Brad Morris was elected vice chairman.
Do I have a motion to approve those? All those in favor? Opposed? We have a report on executive session held June 9th, 2015. Members present were Dave Barfield, John Nuttall, Ruth Hatcher, Ron Stratton, Matt Lade, and Brad Morris. I'm sorry, Director Morris was not. The committee met, or the board met to discuss the vacancy on the board and how to fill it. We determined that the procedure for filling the board vacancy would be to accept resumes from our community, members in good standing, be turned in by June 26th, at which time we would interview those candidates, and make a selection. Motion to approve the minutes? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And I carry the proxy. General Manager's report. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. This is my first meeting, so I might miss a few topics. I apologize in advance. We might have to.
Don't ever let it happen.
We need to approve the minutes of our regular May 21st board meeting. Second. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Mr. General Manager?
Good evening. Just to give a quick update on our TEI, this is the new software point-of-sale system that we started installing in February, went live in February. We are continuing to move forward installing additional areas that were not on our old POS system, and at the same time, we are also virtualizing our network. This was a part of this project, and so give you a quick report on that as well. 34 desktop PCs at 19 of our facilities have now been moved over to the virtual network using the Citrus Thin clients. We have now done some work on the bandwidth as well as putting in these thin clients so there's not near as much data going back and forth between the locations. So we are getting report at Kingswood as well as the Country Club that the process of the golfer check-in and such is moving much faster now. We have barcode scanners that have been adjusted at the facilities now, and again, we're bringing these things online. Pools and tennis facility was brought online in April and in May. We've never had either one of these facilities on a POS system before. We, as mentioned earlier, we have worked on some faster Cox connections, increased our bandwidth a little bit that way. We are still having some issues with connectivity out at the gun range. Cox does not at this point have anything out there, so we still are working on how we're going to connect that area.
Can I ask a question? 34 PCs
Yes.
on the system. How many more PCs do we have to add? Or is that it?
Right now, we're only talking about those that are off location at point-of-sale systems. So we still have, all the ones in the Country Club. Mac has not been added on yet. So I guess most of it's the administrative ones, and so I don't have off the top of my head how many that may be.
Are we about halfway there, or what?
I don't think 34 is half. No, we're probably about two-thirds. We got about two-thirds left to go, I think. Also, if you've noticed around our facilities, we've been making some progress on our handicap parking. This is redone the parking, moved it to a different location at the Kingsdale Pool, and this is the actual parks. Redone it at the Kingsdale at the end of the month. It was still in process. It now is completely finished. This is at the pavilion at the Metfield Park. We had to completely redo this sidewalk as well as build up this area here and then put a sidewalk out to the pickleball courts and the basketball courts. We removed all the kitchen from the Metfield Clubhouse in anticipation of moving membership services into that area. As far as our water system, we had 22 one-inch service lines that leaked. We had to repair or replace. A lot of our old lines are galvanized, which does not do well in our soil. And so when we have a leak there, we dig them up. They usually lose their integrity, and we have to go back and replace them. We had to replace one fire hydrant. I think I missed a slide. Yep, we had a contractor to break one of our 6-inch mains. As far as other things, a few other things that we did during the month, there was 296 fire hydrants that were serviced and maintained. We flow tested 26. 11 had to be repaired, and we had 665 work orders were completed, and 255 one-call locates. That's still staying kind of steady there. Those one-call locates can kind of give you an idea about what kind of growth is going on, what kind of development's going on out there, because people are getting ready to do either remodels or building, but at this point that's not growing. Moving on into golf, I want to talk a little bit about our rounds. We are in this south central area. The south central area lost about 7.6% from last year in 2015. If you zoom in a little bit better in that south central area, Arkansas as a whole, as I mentioned, 7.3% down for April, but for the year about 11.5% down. This thing's skipping around. As far as our golf rounds, last year this time we had 62,836. At the end of May we had 51,520, where we had about an 18% decrease. The way the spring weathers have been in recent years, you just can hardly find a trend and compare year to year because of the different way the weather's been going. And this year, of course, has been very wet. As you're aware, we made some fee increases for the 2015 budget, and so we're going to do a little bit of comparison of some of our annual fees. As far as the AGGF, we went from 336 to 404, so we actually had a fairly good increase, and I believe that is the largest increase in one single year that we've had since we've had the AGGF. This is the makeup of that. We certainly have seen a lot of people moving from the monthly to the annual. So in the past, there was a lot more people that was paying on a monthly basis. Now that we instituted for 2015 a 10-year service charge with each month, most of the people have moved over into the annual pay. As far as seat leases, we had an increase from $688 to $720 for the primary, and one increase up to $139 for the secondary. Golf value cards actually shrunk by about 200, and part of that increase went over to the annual. The other part of this, again, it still could be weather related since the weather has been so iffy. Private card registered went from 523 to 446. But to look at our data as far as our income, in 2014, we had almost $1.9 million in revenue. This year, we had $2.1 million, so $231,000. Although the green fees, as I mentioned, a lot of people moved from monthly up to paying it annually, so we got that money up quicker. So I took that out of the mix. So if you just look from apples to apples, we've increased our revenue $64,000 in golf over last year. Boat registrations went from 3,003 to 3,096. This is how it's made up. Not just a whole lot of significant changes outside. As you see, we had a real increase in probably the kayaks. That's what most of that will be. Docks rented, pretty well equal. RV storage, we picked up a few. Photo IDs are down fairly, about 200. But this year we did introduce the non-resident photo ID, so this is the first year we've had it. So 5,800 is compared to 5,600. Moving on into other things that happened during the month, we had the spring mixer. We also have been having demo days at our Tanyard Creek facility. Had a senior women's outing. We have been, as you know, we've changed our policy. We reduced our labor on our staff out in the golf courses, and so we do not maintain consistent water on the course now. And so at the halfway houses, we are slowly going to be changing the old style out as they go of water fountains to the new style that also has a spigot for filling up your water bottles. During the month of April, we pulled the new pump and motor out of the Branchwood well, put that into the Brittany well that had, I don't know, it got struck by lightning or what it was, but we replaced that, and we've got that well back online, and then it did get struck again just here in the last couple of weeks. Cart path projects, this is one on number 9 Scottsdale. We replaced the bridge planking on number 3 Burksdale. Canyon Creek Practice Range has been completely rebuilt. You can see what it looked like when we started. A few pictures of the process, putting in irrigation, bringing back the mix, doing the leveling, getting it ready to sod. As you can see, sodding it. Of course, doing all the other things it takes to get it to come in quickly and healthy. And it was ready to open for June the 6th. Some landscaping work going on over the dogwood. Drainage projects, just because of our topography. There's a lot of areas that remain wet on the golf course, and you can't grow the grass in those areas. So we are continually improving the drainage out there. Of course, it was time for our spring green aerification, which is a process that very needful, but certainly hated by the golfers for a couple of weeks, but it went pretty smoothly this year. We bought this drill and fill machine, which is a much more aggressive aerification type of process. Takes out large plugs, deep plugs, to help strengthen the greens, get out the thatching, and so we did do some selected Highland greens with that drill and fill, but it's a very, very slow process, and so we can only do so many at a time without shutting a golf course down. New sod installation because of the weather. Our Bermuda just has not done well this year. Some areas we had some dead Bermuda, and so we went back and put some new sod. This is one on Scottsdale. Another one we was working on Dogwood, and then here's one on Kingswood. Of course, we did have some minor rain events and some small damage in different places. This one on Scottsdale is an example. Just to bring to your attention and hope to get it out there on to our TV audience as well, just because of the weather that we've had, and we are mostly Bermuda grass on our fairways, and Bermuda does not do just really well until you get up there around the 65 degrees. Our soil temperatures for most of the time, even into May, was the 50s to 60s, so there was not quite the temperature there. We do make a note that that's normally what we see in the April. So May was just much cooler. So we also are impacted. While 80% of Highlands and Scottsdale is common Bermuda, which you just see most of our yards or pastures, we do have some, especially 419, which is a hybrid species, a little bit hardier than your common Bermuda. Just a few of the areas, just because we've got some mixtures out there. This is on Dogwood number 13. You can see the difference between the hybrid 419 and the common. Here's a picture at Highlands. This is an area, because we talked about drainage. Highlands has a lot of drainage problems, and these drainage areas, the grass just doesn't grow healthy. Another picture up here at the Highlands on number 2, common and 419 comparison. Just a few more pictures of what that does when we have wet areas as well. And again, we do try to work some of those drainage issues as we can. The lads and lassies did some projects around Scottsdale. This is out there around the pool and the spring that's out there. It's a really beautiful area, and they certainly have enhanced that a lot, so we appreciate the work that they did there. Of course, it was time back in April. We started getting ready for the summer months. We redid some of our equipment for the playgrounds and our pools. We did our annual inspection, painting, cleaning, those type of things. Fixing, like cracks in here or other things that we have to do as we're getting ready for the season. Again, some more processes of getting through the winter and now getting ready for all the business we anticipate. This is a drawdown tube at Loch Lomond. We went in and did some cleaning. We noticed it was getting pretty full because we were seeing some water. We put in a camera just to make sure the integrity was still good. And there is a couple places that we're going to do some minor repairs, but everything was well after we got it cleaned out. We stocked 750 trout in Lake Brittany, and that will be the last stocking of this spring. Also, as a part of our springtime, we started up the solar-powered automatic fisher feeders. This is the one at Lake Ann. It feeds automatically 6 times a day. We, of course, did our spring sampling for bass, and as you can see, we've got a couple of 9-pounders that come out of Lake Brittany. They've been enjoying those trout. Hot Springs, they have just now hired a biologist for their area, and so they were wanting to learn how to do some of the things that we're doing, wanted to also borrow our electrofishing boat. They sent a team up here of 3 people, their biologist and a couple of students that's working for him for the summer, and they helped us with some of the electrofishing as well as the testing of the fish. Here's some volunteers working out around the Tanyard Creek Restoration Project. You see it's growing in well. We did, of course, have some storms, so there's some things that we had to remove. But here is some examples of how the J-veins are doing what they were supposed to have done. They're moving the water right into this area where you've got the turmoil and then have your calmer water there. Also, the riparian growth is coming in well. This is mostly grasses, but we can see some of the small trees that are starting to come in that is going to lock all of this in place. We now have started running E. coli samples in-house for the first time. We put together the city approached us well over a year ago that they were now required to do some water sampling in the streams around Bella Vista, and they approached us to see if we would do those for them while we were out doing a lot of our sampling, and so we signed a contract on that. That started at the 1st of 2015, I believe it was, and this was one of those tests that we're running for them. Another thing, we have never run tests for nitrates. We are doing that again as part of the stormwater monitoring for the city of Bella Vista. Also, we are working on methods to be testing for phosphorus as well. Just wanted to do a report on GRIP, that is Goose Reproduction Interruption Program. For 2015, just to see the number of nests, whether they be on the lake or the golf courses, there was 13 nests, a total of 64 eggs. We counted 31 goslings at the end that actually did hatch, and our volunteers put in about 207 hours this year. Giving you a little bit of history, in 2009, when we started this program, we found 34, had 141 eggs. We ended up with 26 goslings that year, and of course, the difference in changes. But here's the hours that the volunteers have put in, and you see that we are indeed making some progress here. So that's been a big help for us. I do want to thank the coordinator, Michael Lamone, and all of the volunteers that worked this 207 hours or so for the GRIP program. So we appreciate their work. We did get a stage so that we can start doing concerts throughout from now on around the village. We've got about 5 planned for this year. We just had 2 already. And so this was the stage that we had bought, and we are at this point learning how to assemble it. This, of course, was the 50th anniversary celebration at Tanyard Creek. It was the first one that we held, and had a really, really good turnout there. The weather looked like it was going to rain all morning, but never did, and it turned out to be just a really nice day, and a lot of people came and enjoyed it. As another part of that, besides the music, we also had things there for the children. We had some games for them. We had face painting, such as that, and of course we had food available. And that concludes my report.
Any further questions for Tommy?
You didn't touch on the financials, but once again, the financial packets for the board members was available about 3 days ago, Kathy, give or take. And as of 5:30 this afternoon, we still have April financials out on the website. It seems to be getting later and later every month. So I'm wondering, is that a total e-learning curve that we're dealing with, or we just...
No, it would not be an impact of total E, is there? Okay. It's just been a little bit of, just a few projects that's going on that Mr. Mitchell has.
I just think it's important that the membership have an opportunity to look at it before this meeting in case they want to come with questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. In response to previous open forum comments, we had a gentleman in our May meeting read a statement, and in that statement posed several questions of the board, and we're going to answer those now. The format we're going to use is that Pat is going to read the question in its entirety, and then I will give the response. So, Pat, you want to begin?
As a preliminary paragraph, he said, I did wonder how this transaction would be handled by the POA board. As it turns out, it was handled as I thought that it might. It appears to me that it was less than based in full disclosure and poorly represented POA interests. And then following that, he asks these questions, or makes these statements. Tanyard Creek Driving Range and Dogwood Drive property exchange with Cooper Communities, now known as the Dogwood replat, was not in the POA work session agenda of April 9th, 2015, even though it was apparently discussed at that meeting.
Our response would be that the discussion that took place came about as a result of other business. We, the board, often have items that come up during the course of meetings that are the result of other topics. That is why it did not appear on the agenda. The board chair reserves the right to add or delete agenda items based on new information or situations that present themselves after publication of our agenda.
Number two, the Tanyard Creek Driving Range and Dogwood Drive property exchange with Cooper Communities was not on the meeting agenda late Wednesday the 15th, the day before the Thursday POA board meeting of April 16th, 2015.
We would disagree. The notification was made on April 14th, 2015, as evidenced by communication with the weekly Vista and updates on the POA website.
Number three, the description for this, quote, new business, close quote, on the April 16th meeting agenda was not as a property exchange involving a significant POA investment in the Tanyard Creek Driving Range, but rather as a, quote, Dogwood replat, close quote. This vague terminology effectively minimizes exactly what is being done in the interest of POA members and could lead to misunderstanding.
Our response is the amount of public interest associated with the Dogwood replat at the time led us to believe that this was a sufficient description. We will attempt to expand on our descriptions in the future.
Number four, I was asked in the April 16 meeting what I was doing here if I didn't think this topic was on the agenda. I should have said that I've been interested about how this exchange would be handled. I didn't expect it to be discussed nor acted on as a, quote, final action in the public meeting. If it wasn't on the working agenda provided to all interested parties. I attended the public meeting on the 16th in case it did come up. My concern turned out to be well-founded because is exactly how, quote, new business, close quote, topic was discussed and the property exchange was completed.
And our response is, due to the interests of multiple parties and the proposed documents regarding the exchange being made available, moving forward with a vote on the subject was the next course of our business.
Number 5, if you expect to maintain integrity of the public, quote, agenda, close quote, concept, you need to establish and respect a documented process to place discussion items on your, quote, agendas, close quote, in a timely manner for consideration. Mr. Teal shouldn't have to stutter when this issue was placed on the agenda. I shouldn't have been asked why I was here if this wasn't on the agenda. There really isn't any reason to publish your agendas as though they have meaning in meaningful business topics are then added that aren't on the agendas.
And our response would be to refer back to the answers provided in questions 1 and 2.
Number 6, it appears that the POA wanted to exchange their property rather than protect POA interests. Mr. Bailey explained in detail the efforts to verify Cooper claims that a past property exchange agreement existed. But in fact, it didn't exist, but it appears that POA has proceeded with this transaction as though it did. There was no presented documentation of the exchange, and that is a fact. In 1989, the POA entered into a 30-year lease for the Tanyard Creek driving range property. In 2013, the POA entered into another lease for the Tanyard Creek driving range, reflecting that Cooper Communities owns the parcel that specifically, quote, ends the lease for the Tanyard Creek area driving range, comma, parking and golf facilities, comma, Tanyard Creek hiking trails and facilities, December 31st, 2019, close quote. That may present a less than mutually beneficial agreement between the POA and Cooper Communities. It appears that this is a very well documented and agreed upon threat to POA properties to the benefit of Cooper Communities.
Our response is, the lease on said property would end, and the potential to lose or incur additional fees by entering into a new lease with the lessor was not in the POA best interest. Although no documentation was available, a former employee with the position of director of golf had firsthand knowledge of the situation, confirmed an oral agreement that in fact did exist.
Number 7, in 2013, Cooper Communities knew they owned the driving range property and the POA didn't, and the property exchange had never taken place. End of story. The proposed, quote, Dogwood replat, close quote, property exchange should proceed as a new offer for consideration by the POA board and not as a legacy agreement based in goodwill with Cooper Communities.
And our response would be that a verified oral agreement made by past leadership should be honored morally and ethically by this organization.
Number 8, I think the POA pays the property taxes on these leased properties as provided in the leases. So in fact, Cooper did benefit by these leases. It appears that they benefit without that cost exposure and then hold the goodwill of the POA against them relative to these properties.
Our response is, taxes on the property in question are a small price to pay for the amount of activity and enjoyment that our members derive from the trails, driving range, and use of the parking lot.
Number 9, If you wanted to present that you were protecting POA interests related to this transaction, you could have presented that you considered adverse possession or boundary by acquiescence in these specific instances as they affect the country club golf course and Cooper Communities properties. Point A, the encroachment of Cooper Communities properties into the 18th fairway as established long ago by out-of-bounds markers. Point B, the encroachment Cooper Community properties into the 10th fairway and areas around the green as established long ago by out-of-bounds markers and cart paths. And point C, the cart path encroachment into the Cooper Community's own properties on hole number 10 on the country club was specifically noted by the board members in the April 16th meeting, and any discussion was stonewalled. Why was that discussion stonewalled, and that long-term past use of these improvements by the POA not protected?
And our response is, the lessor holds ownership to multiple properties currently benefiting our membership, some of which would have a negative impact to our membership if terminated. The benefit of using these properties far outweigh any possible negative change in relationship between the two parties when compared to a few feet of disputed property boundary.
Number 10, what was the urgency in completing exchange last month? It appears to me that the Tanyard Creek driving range lease is in place through December 31st, 2019. If this was a, quote, forced, close quote, exchange, suggesting some required urgency, and Cooper Communities held some meaningful leverage to expedite this exchange at this time, just confidently explain the rezoning. Just confidently explain the reasoning. POA members know that this leverage exists in many forms, and if a condition forced your hand, it would have been better to explain the compromised condition.
And our response is, refer to the answer provided for question number 4.
Skipping point 11, that will be answered momentarily. Number 12, I'm not aware of any consideration of property appraisals to compare and evaluate the actual values of the properties being exchanged. This might not have affected anything, but it would allow a fair evaluation of these properties, and it is the correct way to handle any POA property transaction representing the interests of others.
Our response is, in light of the agreements formed by past leadership, any request for property valuation would add cost to our organization without changing the outcome of the negotiation.
Point 13, there may be other POA properties in compromised positions relative to existing Cooper Communities lease conditions that need to be considered as potential financial liabilities. There are a total of 17 properties listed in the 2013 lease agreement, with 3 leases specifically noted as terminating on December 31st, 2019. The 3 specifically listed as though they have some strategic interests for Cooper Communities are A, the Scottsdale parking facility for the golf course, parcel 82, B, the parking area between the Kingsdale Club site and Reardon Hall, parcel 114, the Tanyard Creek driving range, parking and golf facilities, Tanyard Creek hiking trails and facilities, parcel 162. Other than the Tanyard Creek facilities previously noted, what happens when the other 2 are turned over to Cooper Communities on December 31st, 2019, per the terms of the 2013 lease? These properties, and more importantly, the related properties, are effectively leveraged open parenthesis, borrowed from others, close parenthesis, and have very real financial exposure to the POA until the leverage is cleared. Are there any plans or disclosures to be made regarding what Cooper Communities expects from the POA to clear these properties with significant uses to related POA facilities?
Our response is, we cannot speak for Cooper Communities. These are leases that are currently in effect. As they come up for renewal, leadership will work in the membership's best interest for renewals with the lessor.
Point 14, I also understand that I have limited visibility to many legacy relationships, past and future benefits that Cooper Communities may provide to Bella Vista as a community and the POA. I also understand that these relationships can change over time, especially considering the informal agreements and developments that may have been completed from 50 years ago to the much preferred formal agreements and documentation that would be expected today. Those significant changes over time are no reason that the POA board and leadership shouldn't handle their affairs today and in the future representing the interests of POA members without fear, based in fact in every bit of pride that they deserve.
And our response is, we agree with this statement.
Number 11. Point number 11, which I indicated would be responded to just in a little while. The courtesy expected in past discussions between Dogwood Drive residents and Mr. Bailey to understand this potential exchange was not respected. Discussions with Mr. Bailey months ago regarding POA awareness of this transaction were positive. All that was asked in those meetings was open communication regarding this transaction as it would come up in the future. That courtesy was never reciprocated, as though there was some risk in communicating with us.
There were, as he said, quite a few communications, whether there be face-to-face, there were some of those, there was phone calls, and there was emails as well. So there was an open line of communication. I guess I should have called one of them or sent them an email that was coming up to vote. That was not something that even had crossed my mind, that we had been talking about it. I thought it was pretty well had been discussed a number of times, and people knew it was coming, so I really didn't even think to call the people. So I would apologize to them if they expected that.
Thank you, Tommy. All right. Next item on the agenda is open forum. If we have anyone that would like to address the board today, I'd ask you to use the microphone.
I would like to do that.
State your name and your address, please.
I'm Jan Shackelford, and I don't live here, but I am the controller of the POA and for at least 2 more weeks. I am retiring on July the 2nd. I've worked for the POA for 11 and a half years. I lived here most of that time. I moved this last summer. When Tommy accepted the general manager's position, he hired Dwayne to be the treasurer, and Dwayne, showing great wisdom, hired me to be the controller. I'm here specifically to thank Dwayne and Tommy for allowing me the opportunity to work here and be a part of this organization. I've seen enormous progress and a lot of effort to keep doing more with declining resources, namely money and manpower. Tommy and Dwayne have always been very supportive of me and my staff, also very demanding, but they set very high standards, but they never expected more of me and my staff than they were willing to give of themselves. Without a doubt, during my 45-year career, I have never worked for any CEO or even business owner that had more invested in their organization than these 2 men. I have found them to be honest, sincere, of high moral character, and most of all, intelligent and forward-thinking. I hope for the future of the POA and the future of my many friends and coworkers that live and work here, that they will be allowed and encouraged to continue to push this organization and this community forward to be the best they can be into the next decade and beyond. Thank you and adios.
Thank you, Jan. That was very nice. Anyone else?
My name is Tom Richards. I live at 63 Dogwood Drive, and I authored the letter that you kindly responded to this evening. And I just wanted to make sure that I could get a copy of those responses to share with others, if you wouldn't mind.
Would not have a problem with that. If you could somewhere leave an email address for me.
I'd be happy to. I would be happy to.
Okay, and I will get those emailed to you.
Thank you. I also wanted to just clarify something personally. I did not look at the agenda that you mentioned before that was for the evening of the 16th, I believe. You said it was on the website 14th?
Kathy?
It was uploaded the 14th? Okay. I expected that as an answer, and I can appreciate that. However, I was with two people that looked at that on the 15th personally, and they missed it on the agenda. And I'm guessing it was because it was listed as a Dogwood replat. So I wrote the letter knowing full well that I had never seen that personally, but I was confident that I did see them and they did not see it. So that was not my personal observation. That was on behalf of others. Okay? So I appreciate that. But again, it's very apparent these people were actually looking for it on the agenda and did not note it as a Dogwood replat. If that would have anything to do with this at all. And they were specifically looking for that exchange.
And I think we've addressed the fact that in our answer to number 4, that we will endeavor to improve.
I understand. Okay. I understand. And I'm just saying, clarifying that I don't doubt that it's on the 14th. Okay?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all you do.
Old business.
Okay, our clubhouses, we have 2 clubhouses that are in process of having some changes. First, Metfield, as you saw in my report, that we have gutted the kitchen now in preparation of moving membership services back into that area, as well as also putting in a small grill over to mainly service the golf shop, but any other uses of that area as well. The board approved funding, and we have contracted with an architect, and he will have drawings and bid documents ready for us before the end of the month. The other club that we have that is in a state of change is the Highlands Club. We have a leasee. We've signed the contract. He's still committed, or they are still committed. It's a partnership, and they are still very excited to reopen that club. The only outstanding issue is that their LLC's liquor license, and the complication with that is that they are not Arkansas residents. So there's a little bit of extra work that has to be done, and so right now it's just between the attorneys trying to get that all worked out. So it's not because that there is not an desire and a commitment still to do this. The walk-in cooler and freezer should be completed by the end of July, and the hood is estimated to be complete by July the 8th. So we're moving forward on that club as well.
You know how much those are going to cost, Tommy?
They're within the original estimate, don't know yet. 34 and 18.
Okay.
Thank you. New business. Board Policy Committee appointments. The following appointments were made relative to Board Policy Committees. Audit Committee, Joshua Hart and Brad Morris. Marketing and Communications Committee, Ruth Hatcher, John Nuttall, Ron Stratton. Planning Committee, Patrick Lowry, Brad Morris, John Nuttall, Ron Stratton, Bob Brooks. Rules and Regulations Committee, Dave Barfield, Joshua Hart, Patrick Lowry, Brad Morris, Bob Brooks. Now we're going to hopefully appoint yours truly as an authorized check signer. Any discussion? All those, Brad will be voting in favor of this. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, committee reports. Start with rules and regulations.
If we might, one of the things you can hear about in the Lakes Committee is discussion about leaves in the lakes. And one of the things you're going to hear in the Lakes report is discussion about leaves in the lakes. And I'd like to make a motion to send this back to the Rules and Regulations Committee for an amendment to include blowing leaves into the lake into the new policy.
I'll second that for discussion if anyone would like to discuss that.
For the benefit of those that have not been here before to hear the policy change, I'm wondering if, Doug, do you have that available?
Sure.
Would you read that?
Do you want to cover it, Dave, or do you want me
Go
to?
right ahead. I don't have it in front of me.
So the second reading for it's policy 2.07, regulation of common property regarding cutting trees, and it sets for specific fines that could be imposed for cutting trees on common property, clearing common property land, removing trees or bushes and things like that, and provides the ability for the POA to pursue criminal charges against those people. It doesn't mention leaves in the lake. And this
Right.
was to come forward today on a second reading.
And I think what we're wanting to do is see if there's some way we can wordsmith that policy to add blowing leaves into the lake rather than create another policy for leaves, since they both involve common property.
I do have a concern. The cutting down the trees is a criminal activity, and so we certainly have recourse. Blowing leaves into the lake, while is something we have tried to ask people not to do for many years, is going to be very difficult for us to have any enforcement authority. I don't really know what recourse we will have when we catch people doing it. So my concern is, because we've had these type of policies before, that we really had no enforcement, that what we were doing was chasing phone calls that so-and-so is blowing leaves into the lake, and we go out there and all we can do is just ask them to stop. And so if they continue to do it, there's nothing else that we can do to those people if their neighbor continues to call in and report. So it does cause a level of frustration on those that are reporting this to us when we have no real authority to stop it.
We can take it up at Rules and Regs. I'd like to review that, maybe from a trespass standpoint after we've provided notice to them. You know, there may be a way to...
And again, Tommy, we're doing this in response to requests from Darrell and his staff and the Lakes Committee, Lakes JAC, so...
Yes, we would do waste a lot of man hours cleaning up leaves in the lake that block people's yards as well as our facilities. So it would be great if we can do it. I just have that concern.
So then we'll withdraw the second reading.
Well, we may have a motion and a second. We need to vote on sending it back to the Rules Committee.
Can I ask a question and clarification? The motion is with regard to trees on common property. Just as an example, I have a cul-de-sac in front of my house. There were 3 or 4 dead trees on that cul-de-sac. Their removal didn't seem to impact the ecology. And so I'm wondering if we need to specify that the trees, that cutting down trees, we're referring specifically to living trees and not to dead trees.
I think that's something that we can discuss in the rules and regulations.
Actually,
committee
there is a procedure to take care of dead trees. You contact the Vern Olofson's office, and they have a form you fill out. People from his office come out, inspect the area, and they authorize you to do the work. You can't actually cut down even a dead tree
So can we,
without their permission.
so we will be discussing this further in rules and regs.
Right.
Thank you.
Maybe the only other point would be this is a regulation on leaves from, or trees from common property. We'd like to keep leaves out of the lake, whether they're from common property or personal property, either one. I don't know if that means it requires a different amendment or whatever, but we don't.
We'll talk.
Yeah, okay.
So do I have a motion to, any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? Motion carries. Ruth?
One of the main things that was talked about in Golf Committee was the 13 to 15 inches of rain during May and the 18 days of measurable precipitation, which did not allow much work to be done, needed to be done in low golf rounds. So other than that, I think that was the main justification.
Lakes?
Okay, yeah. Darrell gave a report on the fishing derby that we had last Saturday, and there were 148 registered kids that had a great time fishing. He was very complimentary of the volunteers that we had there. He couldn't have been conducted without them, mainly the Fly Tires Club. They had 20 or more volunteers there helping the kids bait hooks and remove fish from hooks, and so on. And as a side note, this morning, we noted in the Fly Tires Club meeting that in addition to that fishing festival, we volunteered for the Baker school kids this month, and also the Healing Waters helping disabled veterans. And as a result of those two efforts alone, we had over 250 hours of volunteer work so far this month. I don't think there's any other club in Bella Vista that can come close to that. Moving on, Darrell was also very complimentary of Arkansas Game and Fish. They provided the netting for us, and when the nets got here, they weren't long enough, and Kevin, the head of the local AGF, drove up to Missouri and got some more nets and brought them down and got everything fixed, so they were able to keep the fish that we stocked within the cove. And the rain held off long enough to complete the derby, but it rained in the afternoon, and the bands were gracious enough to move underneath the pavilion and continue playing acoustically. So everything went well. We've also had some wacky weather, as everybody knows. It's causing Lake Loch Lomond in its annual algae bloom to start blooming again, and he's going to just have to start treating that. He's had to use some subcontracting help because his folks were busy with other tasks like the fishing derby. But we're going to get on top of the algae in Lake Loch Lomond. It's not a health risk. It's a normal algae bloom. It just looks ugly. It's slimy. And it's detrimental to any recreational activity, whether you're fishing or water skiing or whatever. But it's not a health issue. Hot Springs has also been up here training and sharing our electro-fishing boat. They've also been helping us with some of our tasks, and they even bought some equipment for us to help pay back our help with them. As we previously discussed, we had a discussion on weed control and leaves in the lakes, and I promised that I would bring that to the board tonight, and they'll be happy to hear that we're considered again in the Rules and Regulations Committee. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dave. Recreation? No report. We'll have these announcements. The next General Managers Board monthly meeting will be held on Thursday, July 2nd, 2:30 in the Country Club Board Meeting Room. This is a closed discussion meeting. The next Board of Directors work session will be held on Thursday, July 9th, 8 a.m. here in the boardroom. That is an open meeting. And the next Board of Directors regular meeting will be held on Thursday, July 16th, 2015 at 6:30 in the evening here in the Country Club Board Meeting Room. A motion for adjournment?
Move.
Second? Second. All those in favor? We are adjourned.
This has been the monthly meeting of the POA Board of Directors from the Bella Vista Country Club. This has been a production of Bella Vista Community Television.